Alright, so fresh off of the absolutely incredible episode we had of My Hero last week, we continue on with this forest arc here in episode 5. Now, obviously, last week for me was the episode I was most excited about for this whole season. But, there's still a lot of meat, a lot of good things that are going to happen just specifically in this whole forest kind of arc here. Now, I'm sure one thing that is surprising, even for me, when I was first reading this in the manga, is that so Deku has this crazy death battle with Muscular, right? And his left arm gets broken at the start of the fight, and then Deku essentially destroys his arm twice using 100% of his power. So both of his arms are just completely done at this point, and despite this and all of his injuries, he still is going to be running around, helping out people, and doing stuff during these events, right? So, at the start of the episode, it kind of does, it just replays the ending of the last episode. I mean, it's that shit was so hyped that I got no problem with that. And Deku basically explains that, Muscular is fucking done. He says, even though, his arm was already injured when he used 100% the second time, right? Because the first time he used 100%, that destroys his arm, and then he used it again. So he says that it was going to be weaker that second time he used it, but even if Muscular, woke up, he's still not going to be able to do anything. So Deku says, well, we're just going to leave this fucker right here, and we're going to go to the camp, because now that Koda revealed that he has this water quirk, Deku tells him how important it's going to be to put out Dabi's flames. Because they're in this giant forest, the flames are going to spread out, and they're going to, they're not going to have anywhere to go. They're not going to be able to get out of the actual forest with all of, this wildfire around. So, Deku has a couple different things he has to do. One, he has to protect Koda and get him back to the camp so that Koda can put out the flames. Two, the second thing he has to do is he wants to inform everyone that Bakugo is actually the League of Villains Vanguard Action Squad. He is their target. So Deku basically, Koda's like, motherfucker, you can move with those injuries? And he's like, yeah, that's why I saved my legs. And they go race off to the camp because Deku wants to pass over Koda basically to Aizawa or whoever's at the camp, and then go to Mandalay and tell her that Bakugo is the target, and then she can use her telepathy to basically let everyone know, and so they'll be ready to fight. Now, there is also a scene, we see Shigaraki back at the League of Villains kind of headquarters, and he's sitting there and he's kind of discussing with the Black Mist fucker, basically that he was going about it wrong before. Remember, at the end of last season, Shigaraki went and talked to Deku, and after talking with him, he got kind of more motivated, he was more focused and knew in which way he should proceed. And he explains it here, whereas before he explained it as an RPG. The villains were equipped, but they were only level 1, taking on the final boss. And he said this time, we need to do this more in kind of a simulation type matter. He says that, but it's almost like a chess. He needs to utilize his pieces to kind of bring down the hero society, and that's the purpose of what he's doing. And he says that even if they fail, they win, because just their presence is, going to put fear into the heroes, which is true. And then he picks up a picture, showing again that Bakugo is indeed their target, but, Muscular did let that shit slip last time. Now, it cuts back to a scene we saw in the last episode where Aizawa runs outside. He wants to go help everyone, but he basically gets caught slipping by Dabi. Dabi is standing there and lets off one of his blue flames. Now, we see the second part of this right here, where Aizawa is actually so fucking fast that he dodged. Like Dabi had the jump on this motherfucker, and Aizawa still managed to dodge. He jumps up and is kind of like Spider-Man clinging on the roof. Then he just suns Dabi. He erases his quirk, he wraps him up, puts the motherfucker on the ground. That shit is crazy. He grabs him, knees him in the face, puts him on the ground, and he's just like, tell me why y'all are here, who's here, your positions, goal, everything. And Dabi's just like, huh? And then Aizawa just breaks his arm, snaps that shit, and says, all right, come on, let's go, my boy, speak up. At that moment, there's a big explosion, And I think it's presumed that that is Muscular and Deku's fight, because, you know, it kind of... My Hero does this a lot, not just in this arc, but in other arcs, where, like, we'll see a whole bunch of stuff, and then it'll kind of bring it back, and we'll see, you know, different events that are taking place at the same time. So, like, this Aizawa and Dabi right here, this is taking place at the same time that Deku and Muscular are fighting. So that, like, big explosion, you know, probably... either when Deku finishes Muscular off, or when Muscular is pounding Deku into the ground, or one of the many punches that either of them throw, that kind of distracts Aizawa enough. And Ida and some of the other students also arrive, and Dabi kind of breaks free. He mentions that this is as much damage as he can take, and he looks at Aizawa and says, you know, man, I sure hope you are able to protect your students. And then he just kind of fades away. And Aizawa is actually really shocked, like, because he thought that Dabi's fire was his quirk, but, you know, Dabi sort of fades away, and then that's that. Now, it goes back over to a scene where we see Dabi and another villain named Twice talking in the woods. And it's revealed that whatever was going on with Dabi obviously has to do with Twice's quirk, because Dabi's kind of surprised, like, damn, I was that weak, huh? I got beat. And Twice... As you guys can see, Twice is Deadpool. Like Twice is Horikawa's version of Deadpool. The way he's, like, wacky, crazy, his outfit, you know, he's funny. And, like, he kind of, like, as a schizo, has a split personality, like, type shit going on. So he's definitely going to be very entertaining as the series progresses. And Dabi's basically like, all right, well, let's just make another one to keep the pro heroes distracted, so that, you know, the rest of the villains are going to be able to try and capture Bakugo. And it's funny because, you know, Twice flips him off, and he's like, you know, it doesn't matter how many times small fries go in. And then, like, with his other side, he's like, yeah, okay, leave it to me. Let's do it. So they don't go too in-depth right now into what Twice's quirk is, but clearly... that is the reason why Dabi was, you know, able to fight Aizawa and then just sort of faded away. So that concludes that part right there. Now, Deku actually runs into Aizawa, and he's just motor mouthing, just blah, 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 just talking a mile a minute. And Aizawa is kind of looking at him, and, like, you know, he sees his injuries, and he thinks to himself that, you know, Deku is on a high right now. Deku just sort of explains, you know, keep Kota safe. And Deku is going to run over to Mandalay. And Aizawa kind of reminds Deku of what happened during the Stain fight, where even though Todoroki and Ida and, you know, Deku were essentially, like, you know, saving people, you know, like, Stain was going to kill people, they still weren't, like, allowed to use their quirks the way they were. So Aizawa is going to have Deku tell Mandalay that, you know, a racer, like, Pro Hero Racerhead gives them permission to use their quirks, and he will actually take the responsibility, the burden of the students actually using their quirks. But, you know, they have to be able to fight back, or else, you know, some of the students are going to get killed, or even Bakugo might get captured. Especially Aizawa knows this is going to be true, because, like, there's a scene where he's running with Kota, and he thinks to himself that the way Dabi was talking to him about the students, it's clear that the students are indeed their targets. So Aizawa says he's going to take responsibility for what's going to happen later on in order to, you know, give the students the best chance to survive. Now, it cuts back over to, you know, Pixie Bob, Mandalay, and, you know, the rest of the Pussycats. Pixie Bob, of course, was, you know, snuck basically at the start. But this big fight's going on. You know, they're fighting Magne and the other villain, Spinner, or Kisame, whatever you want to call him. Deku actually comes in and destroys Spinner's sword. You know, the shark skin. I mean, whatever the sword is called. Y'all get what I mean. And basically, he tells Mandalay, like, everything, like, you know, tell Aizawa, or tell, okay, so he tells Mandalay to let everyone know that Aizawa gives him permission to use their powers. And he also tells her that their target is Kachan, like the little, like, kind of nickname he has for Bakugo. So that's a good way for her to use her telepathy. A lot of the students know what Deku calls Bakugo, so they'll understand who is actually the target. But the villains, they don't know that little, you know, pet nickname basically that Deku has for Bakugo. So the villains are going to be caught unaware. That's one really thing I like about Deku a lot, is because he's like a lot of these shonen type heroes, right? they're always like, a lot of them are kind of like, knuckleheads, like Goku, Luffy, Naruto. They're kind of like dummies, but they're very, very clever when it comes to fighting, right? Like, this is stated a million times in Naruto, for example, where, in battle, like, Naruto is incredibly clever with how he uses his shadow clones. I remember this was, like, really brought to the forefront when Naruto was fighting Pain, who was an invincible enemy that really he shouldn't have had a chance against. Like, Deku, though, like he is different from them in that I would say he's a lot smarter than, like, Naruto or Goku. And, like, he really is able to come up with, like, kind of these, like very clever, like, things, or, like, he's very smart. Like, the way he was able to get to the fight with Stain, like, in his head, he was kind of going over the things, like, oh, Ida's brother got attacked. He's probably, I know that Stain likes to attack in, like, small alleyways. He's probably not somewhere with a lot of commotion. Like, Deku was able to, have all this info processed in his brain very quickly and move quickly. And, like, same thing right here, where he's thinking and thinking, and he realizes, he could let everyone know who the villains are after without also revealing to the villains that they know, which is ingenious. Now, Deku then immediately races off after telling Mandalay this, because remember, they are still in the middle of their battle, because he wants to, beeline straight to where Bakugo is to help him out. Now, Magne, one of the villains, actually does realize, he kind of, like, thinks about the stuff that Deku says, and realizes, based upon the explosions that had happened earlier, like, that Muscular is one of two in the League of Villains squad that's there, that could have, like, a big flashy battle and create, like, a giant, like, explosion and a power fight like that. And he's also, like, talkative and a bloodthirsty fucker. So Magne figures out that Deku beat Muscular, and Muscular told him exactly what their target was. So he actually heads to go attack Deku, but Spinner actually kind of tosses a knife towards Deku and stops Magne from actually attacking him because Stain had protected Deku before. And Spinner's thing is he's just kind of continuing and following along the wishes of Stain. That's kind of like Spinner's deal. So that is an important thing that happens right there. Now, there's basically 3 other major events that happen in the episode. We see Bakugo and Todoroki are fighting Moonfish. Now, Moonfish, his quirk is he's able to turn his teeth into, like, these razor-sharp blades that are able to move wildly about. And Todoroki and Bakugo are on the defensive. They have permission to fight now, but because they're in this forest environment, Todoroki can't use his flames because he'll ignite the trees, and Bakugo also has to be incredibly careful with how he uses his explosions because they also might ignite the trees. And the way Moonfish is kind of moving around, Todoroki deems that this fucker is, like, very, very experienced in combat, and they're in trouble. Todoroki is kind of defending Bakugo and himself with his ice, but they're not really able to go on the offensive against Moonfish. After this, it cuts over to Kendo and the steel guy. His name is, like, Tetsududu, something like that. I'm not good with the Japanese names. So, my girl, Kendo, and then the steel guy. I'm just going to call the fucker the steel guy. But Kendo figures out that the way the gas is moving and the fact that Mandalay did not mention it in her telepathy means that the gas is probably just sitting in one area, and she's kind of been able to figure out that it's just sort of swirling around, meaning that there's likely a user, like a guy has a quirk, or I don't know, whatever, a villain has a quirk, and he's likely standing in the middle of the typhoon. So they're going to rush in and try and take the guy down. Now, he pulls out a gun and starts shooting the steel guy. But, of course, he's able to harden his skin just like Kirishima. Now, this fight is actually pretty interesting. The villain's name is Mustard. He's also, like, a kid, a student just like them. He keeps shooting and basically says, like, he doesn't like how, basically, the hero system works and how, like, students at a prestigious school are put up above other students. I don't know. That's just how life is. Like, Mustard is just crying like a little bitch. And basically, the bullets don't work, obviously, on the steel guy, but the first shot that Mustard shot was able to destroy his mask. So, he's covering his mouth, he's holding his breath. Now, Kendo comes in, And, you know, her quirk obviously is to make her hands really big, but they also have a lot of power behind them. So she's able to flap her hands wildly, and it, you know, really creates a strong wind pressure to where it's blowing the gas all over. And in this moment, the Steel Guy is able to get the jump on Mustard and basically one-hit KO him, destroy his mask, fuck him up, because he's able to feel the movements of people in his gas, but because Kendo was swirling it all over with the strong wind, that kind of like distracted him and he wasn't able to tell that the Steel Guy was headed towards him. So they got rid of the gas fucker, and then the last thing we see is Deku continues to run towards where he thinks Bakugo and Todoroki are, based upon like, you know, the positioning of when people left to do the courage test. And as he gets in close, he gets attacked, but he gets saved by Shoji, and Shoji reveals that, you know, they were attacked by Moonfish, and Tokiyami activated his quirk, Dark Shadow, which, you know, at night, the darker it gets, the stronger, more powerful it becomes to where he can't control it. And then the last shot we see is Dark Shadow's this giant behemoth monster shit, and, like, that's how the episode ends, where we see that Dark Shadow is, like, at max power. And I'm gonna say this, based upon the way things go down, I don't think anyone in Class A is able to take down Dark Shadow full power. Like, this shit is gonna be crazy. Next episode is going to be insane. My Hero, they continue to make the anime adaptation absolutely perfect. Big fan of it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see y'all next weekend for the next episode. We'll get to see what our boy Tokiyami and Dark Shadow at full power can do. Later.